I think I'll let Megan do this small business. It doesn't matter. It doesn't friggin' matter. Morning. Not sure.
I feel like something's going on. The HR people need to sit next to me. Can I sit there next to you?
Clerk, call the roll.
Glenn Wheatley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Roots, Commissioner of Precinct 1.
Present.
Ellen Allen, Commissioner of Precinct 2.
Here again.
Gary Figgins, Commissioner of Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner of Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitution 4.
And it's good to have you here again.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Our invocation today will be delivered by Reverend Sterling Smith from Whitechapel United Methodist Church. Glad to have you here today. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges.
Thank you, sir. Will you pray with me? Creator, we give you thanks for the gift of your grace. We thank you for our community, our county, our state, and our country. Help us to be a people of compassion, generosity, and forgiveness. Fill our hearts with the desire to selflessly serve those in need. Motivate us to use our minds to explore solutions to the challenges before us. Breathe your spirit into our souls that we might be inspired to love all people. Give us the strength to embrace goodness despite turbulent waters that surround us. Instead, empower us with the courage to face the challenges of our times by trusting in you, God, to lead us through the storms of life. Lord, we pray for our business, political, and community leaders. Grant them wisdom in the decisions that they must make. May the Tarrant County Commissioners Court experience your holy presence as they make informed choices guided by your divine insight. Inspire all of us to unite in purpose, committed to working together for our common good. Remind us that by loving our brothers and sisters from all walks of life, we show our love for you. All this we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag Thank you, Reverend, very much for those words today. Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have several announcements this morning. As it relates to the agenda, first let me say that under the Administrator Section, item 8A9, this is a consent item. We have just simply included the ILA that was part of that court communication, and it's in your red folder this morning. Also, members of the court, just a reminder that we do not have Commissioners Court meeting next week. Our next meeting will be on the 26th. And we also have some good news this morning. Actually, it was this weekend. We began the conversion of the Domestic Relations Office new software, and our guys were working on it all weekend. We went live at 8 o'clock yesterday morning, and we are now live on that system. Our financials checked yesterday. We audited them this morning, and they came back with no problem at all. We have now moved a major piece of software away from the mainframe, and we are no longer using the mainframe as it relates to DRO. So congratulations to Clint Dupree, who is the director of DRO, obviously to the IT department, and that team, and there was quite a few of them. They worked over the weekend on this, and then our office, Chandler Merritt, worked on it also. So congratulations to all of them, and we're slowly but surely moving away from the mainframe.
Very good.
I still want to go somewhere and unplug something before the end of the year.
We'll set that up in your office with your
That'll be
computer.
good. Just whatever. That'll work too.
Also,
Just
members,
someplace.
as it relates to the agenda itself, whenever we get to the administrator section, we're going to take all of our briefing items out of order, and we will be doing the Corn Ferry report first, then a report on an interim report as it relates to public health structure, and then Mr. Tenasia will be making his presentation on public health activities in the county.
Just a further note, we have no audience participation
That,
today.
can we get we're not going to have one.
Well, I think that Mr. Torlincasi must have taken Mayor Parker's advice and gone down and auditioned in front of Casa Mignano today, and maybe he's not.
We do
Sure,
not
okay.
have any audience participation for this morning, Judge.
Thank you, Thomas. Moving right along, do any commissioners have any announcements at this point in time?
I did have one announcement, and I know we'll probably be talking a little bit more about this in the county administrators section, but obviously our small business assistance grant portal opened up yesterday, and I've already received some meaningful feedback from some of my constituents / applicants that's already been passed on to the county administrator's office. But I just want to thank everybody that was involved in getting this up and running and going. It's so important, and I look forward to receiving an update on the feedback that the administrator's team has received so far.
When we get to item number 1 under our section, Ms. South is going to address the court on that.
Sure.
And
That's great.
talk about some of the various issues, plus the numbers that we've seen so far in less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure that on our weekly report that we provide the court, we'll now have a section on that detailing the number of applicants and the types of applicants that we have been receiving.
Okay, that's great. And then lastly, I just want to say that it is good to be back. As many of you may have heard, that I was out with COVID. It is, and I know everyone is different in how they may respond to COVID if you get COVID. My body fought with everything to try to respond to the virus, which I'm very grateful for. I will say that I am still very much battling fatigue, so if you don't see me with my normal exuberance, it's not anything that you've done. I'm just pacing myself back, but I am glad to be back. Very thankful for the community, especially in the many events over the past 3 weeks or so that I missed, but I'm especially grateful to my team for always stepping up and doing everything that needs to be done to respond to our community and to make sure that our office functions as a well-oiled machine. So, and for any of you who reached out to give me a text or an email, a call, dropped off soup, any of that, I am especially grateful. And if you are not vaccinated, I would highly encourage you to do so. I truly believe that because of my being vaccinated and trying to be as safe as possible, I did not have as worse of a case as I potentially could have. And then lastly, I do just want to thank the public health team for how they gave me some very good guidance, as well as JPS for the health care that they provided to me. Thank you.
Well, it's good to have you back. We missed you.
Thanks.
Anyone else have any comments at this time? Okay, next on the agenda is approval of the minutes of our July 5th meeting.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Fickus. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Court members, you have before you our consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Mangus?
Thank you, Your Honor. We can now move to the compensation system survey update. This is something we do on an annual basis. Mr. Paul Golgowski from Korn Ferry is here to address the court at this time.
Good morning, sir. Good to have you here
Good.
again.
Good morning. Down. Its report should be showing up.
It'll be coming up just shortly.
So as it comes up, I started thinking just a little bit. I know that this is our last time probably together in front
Yep.
of each other. As I'm celebrating my 25th year, and Carroll County has been my longest standing client. I thought back about what we do each year for the county. I've enjoyed working with everybody in the county, the commissioners, judge, HR have been fantastic. And when I started this process, relatively, your data relative to the market was, probably at a position that was causing you some difficulty in attracting and retaining employees. And by adapting a philosophy of the 25th percentile, or targeting that, in general, given all the things that have gone on in 25 years, particularly recently, you've stayed the course. You've kind of kept pace with generally what's been going on, and with some few exceptions, haven't had a huge strain on your ability to attract and retain. So I think it's been a good experience for me. I think it's of all the clients I work with, I think you guys are one of the best clients I've ever had. So without saying, I'm worried that I'm the first one up, and no one wanted to sit next to me. So I'm a little worried about that. So here we're going to jump into it a little bit. And I understand my page numbers are going to be different. But this slide here that we're on, it basically says generally what we've been saying over the past several years, even with COVID, pre-COVID, you guys generally are close to, not in every job, not in every structure, not in every grade, but in aggregate, if you just compile it all together, you are in essence laying right on top of paying your employees at what your philosophy says is what you wanted to target the market at this 25th percentile. And given all those things that have been going on, you're still just generally right there. Now the question is, will that still be effective on your ability to attract and retain, given some of the craziness that's recently gone on in the market with high inflation? I understand that you all have addressed that previously, or recently, I should say. The talk about recession, the talk about retirees coming back into the workforce. So it's shifting again on what does an employee want, and what will they be willing to come, what do they need out of employment other than a paycheck? Is it going to be something else? But in general, in terms of statistics and the way we've always analyzed the data, you generally are sitting at the 25th percentile. Man, that is hard to read, and I apologize for those people who have hard copies in front of them maybe. I tend to, in every one of these categories, and we've got it broken out like you break out your program. You have an exempt group, a management group, an IT group, and so forth and so on. We do a little bit of head count, do a little bit of payroll, just to give you a sense on where are the larger buckets and smaller buckets of dollars being spent in these groups, those with high numbers in them, obviously. But in the middle section, there's usually 3 lines of verbiage there, or text, and I focus on the middle line, because the middle line puts in writing, if you will, where do we see that particular group being paid relative to the 25th percentile. And because we look at it by grade as well, so if we're looking at the exempt line, it says you're 0.2% below market P25 for exempt in aggregate, but it ranges from 2.3% below to 1.4% above, depending what grade you're in. So that's where my eyes generally focus, and I point out to you, because each one of those basically says, with maybe an exception here or there, that you're generally paying your employees close to what you are wanting to pay them based on your carrying philosophy that you've had for 25 years. And Judge, when we talked about this maybe a month ago, I threw out a number, and you got me. But do you want to know what that number was 25 years ago? For total payroll? For total payroll today, based on when we pulled data from Tarrant County, $307 million today. 25 years ago, I assumed something the other day.
You said 40, I believe.
I think I said 50.
Well, I'll go
But I
along
was
with 50.
off.
Well, you were off a little bit, still
Yeah,
at
I was
50.
off. $107 million payroll 25 years ago. So it has
Wow.
it has jumped quite a bit, but not at the number I gave you the other day. And
That's
of
all right.
course, you caught me. So typically, again, this is a high-level summary slide. We make 2 recommendations, generally 2 broad recommendations to the county. One being, should you or should you not move the value of your structures, your minimum, midpoint, maximum, for each group? And if they move, should they go up by X? 1%, 2%, 4%, 5%, whatever. So we've got those recommendations here in a slide or 2. And typically what happens that when you put that new program in place, those new ranges, you will have employees fall out at the bottom end, or you typically have employees fall out at the bottom end that they end up below a certain level of pay relative to the range, and we estimate a cost to bring those employees up to that level. So it's a range movement that might have some costs associated with it if you still move people into the range if they fall below it. And we also recommend some level, usually in the form of a percentage, what you should consider or could consider as your budget, if you will, going forward for PFP. And we're just going to tell you right now that we're going to say that that number recommended is 3.5%. So that would be, I think you typically put those things into play, if you will, officially, I think in January, if I'm not right. If I'm right, I think that's when that would take place. Questions about those anything very high level?
I think as we're talking through this, or at least some of the conversations that I've had with some of the folks have been a base and a merit. High inflation, whatever we want to call it, has been a concern, especially at our lower levels. And we are experiencing difficulty in hiring people or even getting them to apply in most every department that we have, pretty much across the various levels within each one of those departments. So probably have some other questions as we go along.
I think that's one of the dynamics of what's going on in the market today that is a little different. I mean, we've had it before, we've had it for a little while, and that's this notion of there are more job openings out there than there are people looking for work. And certainly statistics can say one thing about where you're paying today and what's worked traditionally, thus my earlier comments. You know, to think about, is that going to still play true going forward? Is there something else that's gonna go on in the market that might say there are more people looking for jobs now? Which there are people talking about that right down the road, right down, you know.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball telling you what's gonna happen, but, history says staying the course, at least maybe making some modifications here or there. It's worked effectively instead of just saying, you know, the X is the number and we're just gonna follow the number because the comp data said that. Other things have to come into play, like your ability to attract and retain.
Exactly.
You know, 25 years ago, when I'd walk on the third floor and they had all the postings, just literally, you know, and when you were paying at P10 in the marketplace, 25 years ago, that board was full. It's the first thing I looked at every time I visited HR. And over time, when you got to the 25th percentile, and the economy was normal, if there's such a word, there were a lot fewer jobs being posted up there. But now, there are more jobs than there are people looking for jobs, so that's gonna challenge you to.
Yeah, our
to think
board
of
is
it.
full again.
Yeah. Here's just, again, hard to read for the audience. The next couple slides simply show you the numbers of the recommendations we're making by each group for each grade. And the numbers vary based on the data. So if you're really close to market at a given grade in a given employee population group, the amount being recommended is gonna be kind of small. If you're farther away from market target, the 25th, in a different group or at a grade within the group, we're gonna try to recommend you but make that number a little bit bigger. So that's the philosophy you'd see on page, well, they are very different page numbers. That's the philosophy you see on that slide, where for the exempt at the top end, we're saying maybe a 4%. And here's what's we're addressed. And at the bottom end of exempt, where you still could be having issues hiring, because it is kind of an entry point, if you will. It's not a non-exempt or a craft, but we're saying statistically right now you're better off there than you are at the top end. And you're probably having less turnover at the top and harder than you are at the bottom.
Yeah, and I mean, that is true, and it's for the reasons I have said before, that once we get you here for 10, 15 years, we gotta hook you.
Yeah.
Because our benefits are non-comparable
Yeah.
to anybody other than to another county, from that perspective.
Yeah, I think one of the actual jobs or positions you have typically have lots of difficulty getting people to come to work are your detention officers, right? If you look at the data against those who participated with us, both cities and counties, on paper it looks like you're doing great at the end starting rate. But if you're still having trouble, what do you lean on? Hey, we're paying better than a lot of others, or hey, we need to pay more because we can't get people. So that's some of the art of comp versus just the data itself. So those pages simply represented what we show as our recommended structure moves by grade, by group. And there you'll see law enforcement should be next. Even at the bottom, relatively well, the data, we're suggesting a 3% movement near the bottom, and about a 7% at the top, which is historically where law enforcement is kind of, based on the data, falling behind. We also noticed in the studies, and it's come up probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and there are certain jobs in law enforcement that when you look at the jobs that are being matched, they're significantly lower, on the lower side of their competitiveness. Some of your sergeants and lieutenants, like in patrol, would statistically show that they're dragging behind a little bit more than, someone else in a different position in law enforcement. We said, be aware of that as you go forward, if you still have trouble filling those roles.
Well, and I think in craft area, I keep hearing, in fact, I was talking to someone this morning about the fact that there's significant problems in the craft area. And again, that's where we're probably most competing with the private sector, who are having fits getting people anyway.
Yeah.
And so I'm, like I say, you're recommending an increase. One of the things that we're talking about, at least I believe this year, is instead of just increasing the base and the ceiling, a maximum application, which I believe means we give everybody, if we're saying a 2% high inflation adjustment, that everybody gets it, not just the bottom and not just the top. I would like to see somebody from HR or budget shaking their head that they agree with what I think I heard that through the mask.
It's similar but different. Certainly understand that's very true, that historically Kraft, in talking in Tarrant County language, Kraft Group is the one that probably competes with something clearly broader than just public sector market, right? And somewhat similar yet different. You could argue the IT group might be in the same position. And there has always historically been some discussion about where do we want to target IT. You could actually be in a position to say, where do we want to target Kraft? Do we want to target it at something that's more competitive with the general market? Because it's not just public sector. We really are competing in that group. And competing in the market with there's more job openings and jobs, and you're paying at the 25th, and you're competing against everybody, paying at the 25th is going to be a challenge to attract and retain.
Yeah.
And so it's a little challenge to the philosophy that has historically worked well, but we are in different times again.
So how do we approach something where that you may not move an entire grade up in as far as how you do your structure adjustments, but when you look inside a particular grade, and there are certain functions or positions that compete directly with the private sector. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a good example. Nurses. Nurses are something that we pay at, I think, about a grade 72. And we have an extremely hard time attracting nurses to the county simply because of what the private sector hospitals, sure, non-for-profits, the private sectors, and even the public sector hospitals are being able to pay nurses. Yeah. Not only the RNs, but the LVNs, yeah, and other specialists within, yeah, the healthcare community. How does one approach something like that?
Well, one of the things, just thinking on my feet, which is dangerous, while you have, what I call policy groups or 6 policy groups, healthcare or public health or something like that could be a separate structure, okay, right? And you could say it's going to be, as just an example, and I'm not saying do it today, but if the 74 today has a midpoint, I'm picking a number because I don't have it memorized, $75,000 a year. In the healthcare market, it's going to be plus 10%. Okay. And you use market data to say what could that new structure look like for public health and healthcare. So you could, like you've done in IT. I mean, how long ago? Years and years ago, it was like, hey, ITs, they're different. Let's, yeah, So now we're hearing that here probably in the last couple of years at Tarrant County. So that could be, and I've seen other organizations do it that way.
So we could adjust the higher end. Right now, we hire in as minimum plus 20. So we might be able to adjust the higher end from minimum plus 20 to minimum plus 30. Yeah. Something along that type lines. And then I know one of the items we've got on the agenda later today is as I believe it is, that we're basically saying if somebody comes to us from another county with similar experience, instead of jotting them in at the higher end, whatever that define is, we would take their years of experience and give them credit for that as they come to work for Tarrant County.
Yeah, I've seen organizations, I don't know what specifics are what you're thinking, but there are formulistic ways to say, okay, we're bringing in a nurse. That applicant has 10 years experience of that exact same work, so we're going to target that person because it's 10 years. We're going to target them to this number. Someone comes with this and they have 5 years experience as that same position. We're going to target them at a new number, but a number lower than that, yeah, person with 10 years. We see organizations do that. They call it in the language we would use is credited experience.
Right.
You know, we're almost gonna act like they've been working here, so we're gonna bring them in. But it does create sometimes issues, obviously. You know, if that job was attached to something else, hey, we used to pay that job X, and this job over here the same thing. Now you're raising this job over here by 15%, because I was always mentally associated with being on par with that job. You need to raise me. So you're gonna get some internal noise, is what I call internal noise. But you're doing it because you need to respond on an external basis. I have one more that I just had planned on showing, and it's just visual. The visual, again, on the side screen, very hard to even see. But a visual, if you lumped everybody together and you said, where are we paying people, that would be, it's hard to see again. The black line that's marked TC actual, where are your range midpoints today before moving? It would be TC policy, and then you see market 25, market P50. And that's just a visual of how close you're paying to your current philosophy in aggregate. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions or cover anything else that you might find of particular interest. The other slides in that particular deck are just each group broken out with the same similar visual as that.
And again, I think this year, as we approach our budget and as we get into this discussion, in my mind at least, the things that I'm sensing is we've got a big problem at the lower level. We may need to be above, we may need to at least for the next couple of years rethink the P25, just as you've shown. We seem to be in good shape on that for the most part, but we may need to go up a little bit. We've given the retention payments, or we've scheduled the retention payment this last week, and I think that will help. But it may very well be that as we move forward, that to the extent that we can give the maybe an increase base, merit, and then maybe a retention just to kind of keep people from seeking the next 50 cents per hour after they've gotten the last retention payment that they thought we were scheduled to give them.
If everything continues the way it is today, you're likely going to be facing needing to do that at what I call the bottom end, for sure.
Well, I wanted to be sure.
And it only costs money. Yes, Commissioner.
I wanted to be sure to share some of my concerns. I think it's definitely important that we're talking about salaries and making sure that we are competitive on that front, but that's not sometimes the main motivation for people seeking employment with an organization.
Exactly.
Culture obviously has a huge part in it, and when we're talking about some of the lower positions, we have to know that chasing that 50 cents may make the difference between a tank of gas or not, and especially the way the gas prices are right now. I mean, we're all feeling it, but we're feeling it to varying degrees. And we have to think also about succession planning, because if we don't have that, those entry-level positions where people can gain that experience, and we lose some of those people who are 10 to 15 years now and 20 years are retiring early, or whatever the choices people make to leave the workforce or leave Tarrant County, then we don't have the institutional knowledge or the expertise, which I know that's what the healthcare industry is fighting so seriously with right now, which makes a huge difference. And then lastly, of course, we won't always have the valuations that we have right now. The real estate market won't be what it is. It's very cyclical. All these factors we're having to take into account and consider what we do right now and how that's going to affect us, quite frankly, a generation from now.
I agree. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I said it's those other things. I wrote down some other words around what are employees looking for.
Yeah.
You know, if they want, it's still popular amongst the workforce out there, flexibility and when and where they work.
When and where they work, yeah.
They are paying attention to one's kind of, an organization, it's not just be a public sector only,
Sure.
to the organization's kind of political views, an organization's social stance and an organizational's environmental stance. You know, so the younger generation is touting that those things are important to them. It's just not about pay. That's what they're saying.
Well, I don't speak for the younger generation, but somewhat having a better representation of the younger generation. I will say that that's true. I mean, people are more willing to, you're young at heart, Judge.
Yeah. That's the only place.
People are willing to have multiple side hustles and they'll figure it out, you know, and even though health insurance is important and there are other things, but, you know, it's, there's a lot that goes into,
Yeah, and I would say this year,
yeah.
in the last maybe 24 months even, you could argue that it feels like, while all those other things are being talked about, what we need to pay people is changing, because
Yeah.
they still have to buy gas and whatever. So, and that's why the challenge against this 25th percentile, which has historically worked, I would say, pretty darn well. There's gonna be spots where that might have to be shifted, at least maybe not, whatever you call it, it might mean we have to do something a little different for if the board's filling up with we can't hire.
Well, and I think that's right. I think we're really going to have to kind of put it upside down because, you know, I see in some of your recommendations that, again, you're recommending increase in main points, and the higher recommendations are for the higher level people. And I just can't, in my mind, justify that when we've got people who are close to being paid lower than the poverty level. And I think that is not something that we are, I would be embarrassed for us to have people who are below the poverty level in their payments. And we're talking about giving significant increases to the folks at the top. Again, most of the folks at the top, and this is, you know, I know this is not maybe necessarily true because they could probably make a lot more money if they went out into the private sector. I've always said that once you've been here, if you came from the private sector and once you've been here a couple of years, you change, the private sector is pretty dollar driven. The public sector is pretty passionate about public service. And they just don't, they're not, you know, grading their life based upon the dollars they're putting in their bank. And most of these folks at the higher levels have been here for a while, and the retirement, again, is the hook. Because you're not going to beat the retirement the county has to offer. But we've got to do something for those lower levels because of food, because of gas, and those things. You know, I don't want my employee deciding whether they can set their thermostat to stay cool and then therefore not be able to eat or
Get to work.
get to work.
So again, I agree wholeheartedly. So that if you think about what the recommendations represent, so the PFP, especially knowing now you've done these retention, or you're set to schedule these retention increases or payments, let's say. The range itself is meant to say we need to have a range that's competitive with the market, because that's how we hire people. So if we don't have competitive ranges, we'll have a hard time bringing people in. So if we're having a hard time bringing people in, even though we are paying what our ranges are tied to a philosophy, it just ain't working anymore. We need to have ranges that go higher. I agree with that. The PFP, so structure is about retention. I mean, structure is about attracting people in. What we're paying someone in their pocket today is about retention. So the PFP technically is your retention number, 3.5% plus whatever else you've done. And your attraction is our range is competitive. And we're hearing they don't sound very competitive at the bottom end. Given what all the other factors going on today.
When you're doing your comparison here, Paul, are these entirely based upon last year numbers, or are you taking into account what you're hearing from your other clients now?
We're taking into account what we're hearing, and we're bumping it conservatively. In the market generally, except law enforcement is a little different because we are gathering that I think we gathered it basically in April. But companies like us, and not just us, who have this mass effort to collect data from the market, from their clients, if you will. It's a very seasonal thing, and typically that data is collected in May, late May of a given year. and it takes several months to compile.
But most of the governmental entities that you're talking to and comparing us to are in the same boat we're in.
Right.
And they're not gonna pass their budget until they get to September.
Yeah.
So you're using May numbers.
But we're projecting what we think the market's gonna do in those numbers
Okay.
forward.
So has Dallas County given any kind of retention bonus?
I do not know the answer to that.
Well, and then on your progression
Although I
model,
did- I think I did see that somewhere, and I thought I sent you guys an email, but somewhere in my brain I heard.
I believe that they're working on it.
Yeah, I heard something, but
We may have incentivized them to,
on your progression model, what are the assumptions of that model? And if you can't tell to me all right now, that if you could just
we
follow up.
progress it at about a 4 to 4.5%
Okay.
annualized rate.
And
Typically, we would have done 2.5, maybe 3.
Okay.
and I think we're gonna talk about this at length on the 26th.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the good thing
Voices from the back.
about that is that we'll have a much clearer understanding as to what the AV values are gonna be by the 26th.
Well, and speaking of the 26th, I do want to make sure that I'm fully understanding based off of the conversation we're having right now and the information we got from Korn Ferry, and then the pay equity study, and then the retention action that was taken. Putting that together, what does that look like? What does that actually look and feel like for our employees? Like, I want to make sure we have the fullest understanding. What do we actually do to make things better?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that's one reason why we brought the retention program to you last week. We didn't want to bring it at the same time at Korn Ferry because we see that as really two separate things that
Sure.
collectively address our.
And I've had a lot
Understood.
of good response on the 4,900, because that's, everybody's getting that, and it's not a percentage, it's just, boom, here it is, you get it if you're here.
And the timing that we're gonna disperse that was really important to the
Yeah.
employees.
And we
Most
went,
everybody's getting that.
well, elected officials know we're not getting it, but, it
I'm
is
fine with
what it
that.
is, and it is.
It is.
And besides that, we have judges that would not have been able to have gotten it anyway, because their ceiling is governed by the state. Because we used to have control at least over the county judges, and they didn't like the fact that we were paying them more, so. But you're right, there's at least 20 that might have been able, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26 that could have gotten it that are not going to get it. Go right ahead.
Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you.
I've enjoyed the 25 years working with you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So members of the court, we can continue on the briefing agenda, and now we're going to go to item number C, which is the Tarrant County Public Health Organizational and Operational Review and Strategic Plan. Mr. Brian Ackerman from Ascendiant is going to be making that presentation. As Brian comes forward, just a reminder, when we began to outline what we were going to do with the ARPA funds and the FRF funds, one of the highlights or areas that we were going to concentrate on was that we wanted to improve our public health department, take it from good to very good to a world-class health department. And we wanted to also look at the organizational structure of that and then the facility structure. So we've engaged the consulting firm of Ascendiant, and we're here to do an initial briefing of the court. And so, Brian?
Thank you, appreciate that. Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good to be back with you all here today. It's hard to believe that a few short months ago when I was here last, we were talking about an ice storm and coming in 100 degrees, a little bit different. It's amazing what a few months will do, but good to be
But
back.
we're still concerned about the same thing, and that's whether the grid's going to hold up.
Exactly, just a different spin on it, right? Absolutely,
Hot mess.
absolutely. But lots happened in this process since we were here with you last, and really this is an interim update that we want to just share with you kind of where we are. And to GK's point, we were tasked with kind of laying the framework and the path towards this world-class public health system. And the way we're going to do that is a variety of phases. We talked with you about this a few months ago, but really just wrapped up phase one, which is where we are today, assessing the situation. And wanted to give you an update in terms of what we're finding. So no recommendations in terms of where we are today. It's just what we're finding based off the current situation. Then we'll move through the remaining phases and begin to outline where we want to go and how we're going to get there. So phase one, a lot of work's been done in a couple different areas. One, we've had an opportunity to gather data from a variety of other public health departments around the U.S. And a handful here in Texas, really trying to understand from a comparable community perspective what they're doing, what their staffing structure, org structure looks like, what programs and services they're offering. I will tell you, having done this for 20 years, you've seen one health department, you've seen one health department. So the idea that there is a single best practice out there is perhaps a bit of a misnomer, but our goal is to really talk with these folks, see what they're doing that could work here based off the needs of your community and the structure that you have and how it may need to be adapted. So an opportunity to actually interview quite a few of these health departments. I'll give you a list of who we've talked with a little bit later so you can see who those were. That was a good bit of the time that we spent over the past few months, but we also did some staff surveying, some interviews with staff as well, had some good conversations, trying to understand their opinions on what's going well, what might need to improve or change. We'll share some of those findings as well. And then community leaders as well. We had some focus group opportunities in a survey there, talking with some of your city municipal partners, school districts, other healthcare organizations throughout the community, just to understand their perspective on the health department and what might be going well and what they see the needs are in the future also, in addition to talking with many of you all over that stretch as well. So kind of stepping back and pulling it all together, kind of where we are today based off that assessment. High level perspective, our perspective is you are in really good shape based off kind of a historical perspective of public health. As we'll talk about in a minute, public health continues to evolve, and moving towards that world-class system is going to involve some changes and require some changes. And really the key themes that begin to come out as we think about that evolution are listed here. And each of these components are going to be necessary to evaluate. And so we've got a lot of information on each of these different areas within a more detailed report. But for purpose of today, we've just got a one-slide summary of each one, just to tell you what we're beginning to see, what's rising to the surface from kind of a current assessment perspective. So as we do that, the first thing relates to the organizational structure. And as a summary level, we had a chance to kind of evaluate a number of different health departments, again, in similar size geographies as you all, again, understanding your geography is unique, so we want to account for that. Everyone's wrestling with the same situation. A lot of changes as a result of COVID, a lot of staff increases, so how do we adjust our org structure appropriately to match the needs that are arising as a result of that? In addition, I think one thing's interesting, the second bullet listed there, quite often the org structures are really tailored to the talents of the individuals existing within the entity. And that's worked well up to this point, but we certainly think as we're looking towards a more future kind of public health 3.0, which we'll define in a minute, kind of defining the structure you need and the types of individuals that need to be in roles, and then filling those positions as necessary is going to be, maybe a bit of a change or an evolution from what most health departments have done historically. So we'll be continuing to evaluate that through this process in terms of what that means for you all. And then certainly the last point as well, it needs to be flexible as you all continue to grow and change. Making sure that the org structure is continuing to be reevaluated is going to be pretty important as well. A few key takeaways, again, a lot of info on this slide, so I won't read through everything, but again, from potential areas for us to consider. One is the potential for a second deputy director. Beginning to think about what that looks like from a responsibility standpoint and a reporting mechanism. Again, right now, Vinny has a lot of direct reports. As we think about moving forward, is there an opportunity to add a second deputy, and what might that look like? Some more progressive organizations are beginning to do that as a way to think about the future structure. That's one piece. The other thing to point out is whether health equity stays within family health services. That's something else that a number of organizations are continuing to evaluate is where do we place it? It needs to be an organization-wide focus. And so should it be within one division? Are we able to elevate that to a different location to make sure it's addressing kind of the organization as a whole? So those are the conversations we're continuing to have, and as we think about a future org structure for your health department, maybe something that we'll consider evolve. So again, some front-end stuff that we're beginning to see that others are doing and having some success in as well.
I think that last point that you made is critical. Moving forward, health equity should be an organization-wide focus, and it should probably report directly to the top and not be buried in some other department, which dilutes its impact on the organization. Health equity needs to be able to observe, investigate, and comment upon all of the practices of the agency, and observe and investigate and comment upon all of the circumstances in the community that affect overall health, and advise the director on how to best approach these issues with an equity lens. So that's one organizational change that I would applaud.
Well, I think even more important as we think about transforming to a world-class organization, which to us involves a lot of the social determinants of health and kind of not moving beyond the traditional services that we provide, but building on those, and that health equity lens for all those kind of at that level is pretty critical. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
The public health department, different from the hospital district, is well positioned to look at the social determinants of health and to integrate those social determinants on how it addresses the overall health of the community. The hospital district, on the other hand, while it has some community outreach functions, primarily it is charged with addressing people who present themselves to the
Downstream,
hospital with certain conditions.
Yeah.
Public health is different. It must and should be involved in the community at large and use the social determinants and other tools to help address the overall health of the community. Now, this works best when public health and the public hospital district have a strong working relationship and leverage the strengths of each organization.
And I will say it's encouraging as we've talked with kind of other community leaders and partners of the health department. There is a strong desire for them to be that leader as it relates to kind of that socioeconomic perspective, an information hub of sorts, and pushing out information and helping to drive some of those efforts. So I think the foundation is certainly there, and I think it's pushing forward that in a little more effort and detail in the years ahead. So I think that's, as we're getting to kind of where we want to go and how we're going to get there,
Sure.
it needs to be a key piece. So thank you for that. Another area that we looked at relates to just our complement of kind of programs and services and what we offer. Again, evaluating what others are doing, not necessarily for it to speak to exactly what we need to do here, but just to see if there's some lessons learned. Certainly, the perspective from a lot of the more progressive areas is this public health 3.0 perspective, which kind of gets beyond traditional health and healthcare. And as listed here, you all are already doing a handful of things within each of these categories. But there are some other programs and services that we are going to want to look into, consider, adding and expanding in order to, elevate our efforts as it relates to those. So, again, more to come around that from a program and service complement. But as we're doing that and describing what those might look like, that obviously also has an impact on the org structure we talked about earlier. So beginning to pull all that together the next month or two is going to be the next step. A lot of small font here. Here's the list of the different organizations that we talk to and health departments that are out there. We want to look at a few metrics, staffing being one, and then we'll look at budget on the next slide. And a couple things that jump out, particularly on the right-hand side with the notes. To my point on the front end, every health department is different in terms of the services that they offer. Some are offering EMS services, some are doing more in other areas, so their FTE numbers are somewhat elevated. But we would say, as it relates to others comparable to you all are very efficient from a staffing perspective. I think there may be opportunities as we talk about growing programs and services and the organizational structure to consider, where some expanded opportunities for staffing is going to be necessary. But certainly right now, you're sitting at about 3.0 per 10,000 FTEs with a benchmark from, one of the primary public health organizations out there, NACHO, of about 4. So we think there's some opportunity there, but we want to be mindful about how we consider potentially expanding staff in light of obvious budgetary constrictions and the priorities that are going to come out of the strategic planning process in phase 3.
So Ryan, before you move on, I see that there's the NACHO benchmark.
Yeah.
And the note says that it's pre-COVID benchmark, so have they not issued a during COVID benchmark since we're 2.5 years in?
They're still trying to collect information. We had a good conversation with their representatives. Hopeful that some of that newer information will be available before we conclude this process. I'm not guaranteed. It will certainly be higher than 4. We know that. So when we look at you all currently at 3, that's where we begin to think maybe there's an opportunity and a need to consider expanding some staffing. But again, we want to do that in an appropriate way based off the programs and services you all want to focus on.
And they may be present, you may have a lot of representatives at NACO.
At NACO next week. Okay.
That will do that, but I would assume that their information is a gathering of information from the public health departments, and they, like us, we probably haven't, we're still, I don't know that we've grown significantly since COVID, and all the people we have are probably considered project employees, and everybody's probably going through the same thing. Yeah. To that same end, I noticed that you've got Houston and Harris County. So obviously, several decades ago, we combined into one. Fort Worth gave up theirs, and we all joined together here. Are there other? In other, these are the big counties.
Yeah.
Do the cities within those counties have individual, or did you research any of that? That might be an interesting.
Something we can dig into. I know Denver's a situation where they've got a specific city-specific look. So we've had one conversation with them. It's not as prevalent, in other parts of the country, but something we can look into. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to see that on your list of departments that you have studied is San Diego County. Both Glenn and I have had a chance to look at public health departments across the country, and I have always been impressed with what they do in San Diego County.
Yeah, they're doing some really great things. And I do think, again, like you all, for all of these, we tried to find the larger geographies, high population growth. They're dealing with that too, and trying to be proactive on the front end of some of those things. So, yeah.
But they also have several collaborations with educational institutions that have public health graduate programs.
They do. Yeah. Yeah, and collaborations and partnerships is going to be certainly a key theme that we'll talk about in a minute for you all to consider, even beyond what we're doing now, to leverage some other expertise as well. That's good. So I think some opportunities in staffing as we looked at that. From a budget perspective, we looked at it two ways. Just want to try to get a handle on the total budget, which is a little further to the right, including all funding sources. And then we did a deeper dive on just kind of local funds to see what that looks like. Again, for you all, with the notes kind of being considered for services provided by others or excluded. Again, pretty efficient operation relative to just a total budget for the size of the population. And some opportunities here, I think, in terms of the mix of local funds versus grant funding. The health department is doing a great job from a great grant funding perspective. I think kind of coupling this information with the previous staffing information, oftentimes the grant funds can, limit some flexibility as it relates to staffing, right? So the ability to flex staffing in different need areas as they arise. And so is there an opportunity as we think about ramping up staffing where it might be necessary to leverage some local funds where it might be available to provide some of that flexibility should needs arise and the need to adjust staff responsibilities, again, not on a daily basis, but quarterly or even annually, needs to be considered. Talk a little bit about communication. Key theme that came out, and a couple different things as we're building towards this world-class public health organization, is the need for improved communication, particularly internally as we talk about everything that's happened with COVID and the growth. I think there's a desire for improved communication internally across divisions. When we asked staff kind of what are the top priorities for things the health department should be focused on, communication was number 2. Staff retention was number 1. So very much in line with, I think, the previous conversation as we're thinking about ways to kind of assist with retention going forward. As you get to kind of the bottom right of the pyramid and the conversation we had with partners, overwhelmingly positive in terms of the health department's interactions with them. They feel heard. They feel like they can get hold of someone and have a conversation very quickly. So a lot of positives there. And then a more kind of the general community, I think there's opportunities for improved communication there as we think about outreach, getting more and more into the community, some of which we're doing now, but those are the types of things that came up. So opportunities in communication as well as we think about the next few years.
When you talk about partner organizations, give me some examples of who you mean by partner organizations.
School districts, we talked with a lot of the school districts, and they've got a desire for increased involvement from a public health perspective, particularly pushing more information to them. I think they acknowledge today if they need something, they can reach out and respond to very quickly. But as we're moving more towards this Public Health 3.0, having the health department push more information to them as necessary. Those types of things from a partnership perspective. Next, I have a few other specifics on the slide that will kind of detail other things that folks mentioned. But most of it is in light of kind of this social determinants perspective and just taking that next step and letting the health department get a little more involved in that as it relates to partnerships.
So schools, I could definitely understand that, but I'm hopeful that, especially as we look at being prepared for the next pandemic, in my opinion, we can never be staffed internally for that.
Sure.
But that we should have close working relationships with education institutions that have public health graduate programs,
Yeah.
hospitals, especially physicians, and other groups. And so as we ultimately get to where are we going to be in the strategic plan, I hope it includes a lot of collaboration with hospitals and other healthcare organizations.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's helpful. And I will say, even conversations with them, and there is an interest for that going forward. So something we'll definitely make sure we're taking into account. Commissioner Allen, you mentioned it earlier, culture. It certainly came up as well. And in a bit of a downward trend even leading up to COVID, but we were generally positive in the years ahead, but pretty significant hit. And you all are aware of it in terms of the public health workforce and just the hit that they've taken as a result of COVID. Some improvement coming out of that. We've certainly heard that from staff as they've kind of given us their perspective, but a desire to get back to maybe some of the basics and what we did before in terms of the amount of communication, the ways that we communicated previously, and the year, kind of getting back to the years ahead. Some confusion now about cross-division understanding of what others are doing, and as we're trying to think about a consolidated approach to moving forward, having the staff aware of what other divisions are doing is going to be pretty critical as well. So that goes along with the communication and the culture piece being pretty important as really foundational elements before we kind of dream big on the world-class perspective, the foundational elements, making sure those are in place. And then a few other pieces as we're wrapping up. Again, the culture concern is not unique to you all. There's certainly a lot of work is being done and research to just understand other areas. The survey that's referenced at the top here, one of the key numbers that jumps out from that work was 44% of current public health workforce is considering leaving their organization in the next 5 years. And that's after a lot of the attrition has already occurred. So that retention piece that we talked about earlier is going to be pretty critical as we work through also the culture side of things. So keeping that in mind from a kind of a growth perspective is going to be pretty important. All right, in the beginning to wrap up, partnership and collaboration, we've hit on that a number of times. That'll be a strong focus of the recommendations as they come out. This is just a snapshot of kind of public health 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. And the focus of 3.0 is, again, not getting away from those foundational health services, but expanding beyond those to really improve social determinants of health. And really, it was encouraging, as I mentioned, particularly the focus group conversations that we had, a desire to focus on allowing the health department to be that leader, that health strategist, if you will, for the community, centralizing information and distributing it as necessary kind of throughout the community and to the partners.
And one of the other things, I think, one of the things we've targeted with our ARPA funds has been the mental health area. Yeah. And whether we've mentioned trying to put an emphasis, maybe even with our own benefit plan, to annual mental health checkups as well as annual physicals. Yeah. But public health could also be that, especially across the county, to groups that in many cases would be uninsured.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that broader perspective on what health really is, and mental health certainly have to be at the forefront of that as a consideration. That's helpful. And then just wrapping up, a lot of information on here, but the additional areas for collaboration, mental health shows up here in that bulleted list. So I think it's certainly on the minds of most that we talk to, but certainly pushing towards that as areas of focus in the years ahead. Having the health department as kind of this information hub, gathering information, disseminating it, that's a key piece as well. So all of that being considered is, again, we're doing okay now, but if we're really trying to push where we're heading from a world-class perspective, areas we might need to focus on.
Under that mental health piece that Judge Whitley just talked about, we must have a recognition of the impacts of trauma on the life courses of individuals and generational trauma and its impacts on the life courses of families. These are important public health issues in the 3.0 model that I would not like to see us lose focus on.
That's good. No, thank you for that. Absolutely. Okay.
So Ryan, I have a few things. Oh, were you done?
Yeah, questions,
Okay.
comments, so yeah, anything else, yeah?
So let's see, going back to the list of participants, or basically folks that you all solicited feedback from.
Yeah.
I would like to see that list just to make sure that
Yeah.
we're not categorically missing any constituencies.
We can get that to you.
Okay. And then also, you had referenced a study on, the Public Health Workforce Interest and Needs Survey. Is that something that we could access? I'd love to see that, especially as we're heading to making these critical decisions about retention, efforts and pay and things.
Yeah, we can share that with you, and there's some other resources we have as well that
Okay.
can give you so you can go through those.
And then lastly, this is more of a comment, but in looking at this that you provided, Public Health 1.0, with the timeline of the late 1800s, it illuminates uneven access to care in public health, and we're still struggling with that. unfortunately.
Yes,
So-
it is very true. Yeah, I think the intent or the hope is they build on each other, but you got to be careful not to focus too much on the new and kind of lose track of what still are those underlying issues from even the 1.0 and the 2.0. So
Yeah,
that's very true.
that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, the one comment, and it goes along with what Commissioner Brooks said, I think it's extremely important that we understand the impact that trauma has, but I think it's equally important that as we move down that track, that we, understanding what impact it has is not enough, but we've got to be prepared at that point. If we're going to do the study, let's be prepared at the end to help provide solutions to how we counter that trauma and the impact that trauma's having on folks from that standpoint.
Appreciate y'all's time. Thank you.
Thank
When do
you.
you think you're going to be back to see us again?
End of August into September, depending on scheduling, would be the goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the court, we can now move to item A under the briefing. This is an update on Tarrant County public health issues. Mr. Thames is here to address the court.
Morning, Your Honor, court members.
Morning, Vinny.
I've got a couple of quick updates. So last week after our court presentation, actually we ended up moving our community level of COVID to high. Case counts have been increasing, so that threshold got triggered. Some of y'all may have seen the coverage in the news and probably heard from me directly as well. But, you know, we're definitely seeing an uptrend continue to develop here in Tarrant County, and I don't think we're done yet. What I keep looking at is at the national level, the data has flatlined, which is sort of good news, but it's flatlined at a high level, so more to come. What we're also seeing is a shift in what's actually taking over. BA.5 has become the predominant strain all across the U.S., over 50% of the cases. And it presents its own challenges. One, it's a little bit more severe than what we saw, you know, with the earlier strains. But the big issue seems to be vaccine breakthrough. There's not a good match in the vaccine at this point for all these advanced strains. So the recommendation continues to be get your vaccine done, get your boosters done. And I want to explain why that is important. You're revving up your immune system, even though you're giving it a different look, you're revving up your immune system. So when it encounters BA.5, you're likely to have a good response, which is going to help you fight off the illness sooner. So it's very, very important to have that vaccine and stay up to date. But we're seeing a good number of breakthrough cases. So don't think it's an invisible shield. You took the vaccine, nothing's going to happen. You got to layer your strategies because this is there. And as if that news was not enough, there's a new strain that has emerged, BA 2.75. It emerged out of India, and now it's in the U.S. and a few other countries. A lot of concerns about that strain because, you know, last time we had Delta emerge out of India, so who knows what this one will bring. So lots of things to watch with COVID. It's not done with us yet. So we're just continuing to see, but I'm kind of staying, you know, fingers crossed, optimistic that as the data has leveled off at the national level, we'll see a little bit of a surge and hopefully level off and then follow the national trend. But if a new strain takes over, well, all bets are off, unfortunately. So what to do at a high level? I kind of highlighted a few key things because the focus seems to be on the individual, what they can do. It is good time to bring a well-fitting mask back. I don't know if y'all noticed, but I've started wearing KN95s, switch from the regular surgical mask, because you encounter a lot of folks that have COVID and they don't even know it. And I took my booster 8-9 months ago. So I'm to the point where it's a waning immunity situation, and so is for many people. So wear a well-fitting mask when you're indoors, and then stay up to date with your COVID vaccines and boosters. I'm not eligible for another booster, but people over 50 are, so they should take that opportunity.
Quit bragging.
Yes, sir. And then follow CDC recommendations on isolation, quarantine, and, you know, when to get tested. We've talked about people need to have a little testing plan at home, you know, get some rapid test kits. They're easily available. So all those type of things are things to do differently as the levels change, and this is at the high level recommendation.
Well,
yes, sir.
Before you move on, okay, you sent out something, or somebody sent out something that said, here's what our new procedures are and what we're supposed to be doing. And I would like for us to, as a court, discuss that, because, you know, one of the things on there is everybody indoors is supposed to wear a mask. Turn around. Nobody's paying attention. And 2 of our court members are, 2 of us aren't. But I think we need to discuss this, because I quite honestly believe that everybody's just gotten to the point to where they're not even listening to us talk, not even listening to you talk. And as a court, we need to decide what we're going to look at requiring. We can affect ourselves. I don't have the ability to make orders outside, but you don't have to do anything but look around the room to see that if anybody knows they're supposed to be wearing a mask based upon what the public health director sent out, then
What ability do we have to?
Well, I guess that's the question.
We can recommend that people take certain steps.
I guess, Roy, that's the question.
Yeah.
And where I became a little irate last week was the fact that I don't guess I read the email that said everybody's supposed to be wearing masks. And again, I don't think anybody's paying attention anymore. I think everybody has just accepted that it's down because not too many people are going to the hospital. My number one
Not
priority,
I
I
hope
understand.
Not yet.
But my number one priority has always been keep hospitals open. And you're right, if it's increasing, when I've had conversations with the hospital CEOs, none of them are in the least bit concerned. None of them are seeing their hospital beds fill up with COVID patients. And if they are, they're in the hospital, not necessarily in ICU. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have treatments. But you're right, we need to reemphasize the vaccines and go through some of that. And as a court, I mean, at least at this point in time, most everybody has just generally accepted that, okay, I'm going to get it. And because I've been vaccinated, it's probably going to be not that big of a deal. But certainly we just need to discuss it, because I think everybody has gotten very familiar and just accepting of the fact that it's there, but we're not going to worry about it. And as I heard this morning, we had a significant number of increases in positive cases, and that's just what is being reported. Because of all of the home kits, the feeling is that it may be multiples of what has been reported that is actually out there and existing.
We also don't have the increased testing that we had previously, which I think that we need to be talking about how we're going to increase testing access, because that is one of the, even though people have the ability to get at-home tests, if they're not able to get any for whatever reason, and they're going to some of the pharmacies and having to pay quite a bit to get a test.
I agree with that 100%. And I think that we need to, that's what I want us to come back and have a pretty serious discussion about this. About the testing. I would, maybe emphasizing the vaccines and doing a lot of that stuff. Are you looking at me because you got some concerns, or are you just listening?
No, sir, it's listening intently.
Okay, well, sometimes when you look at me like that, I kind of get worried I'm going down a path I shouldn't be going
I
down.
don't mind having these discussions, Judge. And I personally know who have come down with COVID in the last 2 to 4 to 6 weeks, that the numbers are going up at a pretty rapid rate. But I don't think there's much of an appetite in the general public to going back to wearing masks or testing. They're still doing testing at the Southwest Subcourthouse. There's never a line.
Well,
Nobody is testing.
But that's our only public health location that's open right now.
Well, actually, we have more, but yes, I mean, you know.
I'm sorry, outside of like the public health?
Yes, public,
building?
yes, that
Okay.
is correct.
That's
We're not contracted currently or have big locations, that is right.
Right.
And Roy, that's the reason I want the conversation to come up, because this was sent out to everybody. And so everybody in here is supposed, or at least every employee in here is supposed to be wearing a mask.
So,
Well,
Your
but
Honor,
the
if I may
governor
clarify,
prevent-
these
if I
are
could, Vinny.
non-binding recommendations. We don't make policy, that's y'all's prerogative. We're just repeating non-binding recommendations as guidance from the CDC.
I believe this was sent out to the department heads,
Yes,
which
sir.
implies that it's county policy. And
No,
it
sir.
says, wear a well-fitting mask indoors in public regardless of vaccination status.
So, a couple of years ago, Ms. Nicholson was here asking about guidance. Y'all had directed us to create guidance. So this is the continuation of that update. This is the fourth update to that guidance. It's non-binding. The health department does not put policy for the county. That's y'all's prerogative.
But when it goes out to the county, and we've not seen it go, and we've not said send it out, it is implied that it is policy.
Yeah, so what we were trying to do was simply update CDC guidance. And that's something we've done, I think, 3 or 4 times now. Whenever we get it, we put it up on our website, and we want to make sure that the departments are aware of it. It's not a mandate, and we'll be more than happy to bring that into you all, and we can talk about it as you're requesting. But believe me, we're not making up those rules. Those are simply new guidance from CDC. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons that we have it, you might, on the coronavirus, you've seen that we've gone from a low to a medium and to a high, and that was really in the last 6 weeks. And so that was the only reason we updated.
All I'm asking is let's have a more
Sure.
robust discussion and decide as a court, because I really don't feel like I have any authority under current gubernatorial restrictions. And as a court, we may have some, but those are the kind of things that I think I would like for us to discuss.
I'm not sure that as a court, we have any authority to do anything except to recommend some best practices.
So we'll bring that as a discussion item. Sure, we will. You
I
know.
do agree that we should revisit it. Also, I'll add, and Vinny, this is not me trying to nitpick on your words, but you said that, I guess, the latest variant has less than severe. I think that's, if you compare it to being hospitalized and some of the other, high-level interventions, but this COVID, me getting COVID, was one of the fiercest competitors that I have ever had in my life, and I've been through a lot.
It is no joke.
It is no joke, so I'm sharing that for any of you, not at all to be an alarmist, but just to say, like I shared earlier about still having the fatigue, migraines, nausea, I still have a cough, sometimes it's better or worse or whatever, and that's what I'm still managing right now, 2 weeks after being negative. So, I cannot stress it enough that some people may have no symptoms and others may, it's a total spectrum. So just respect it and govern yourselves accordingly.
And I think that that's what we probably need to be emphasizing more, and not just, but it's also my understanding that are there some tests coming out now that can tell you not only whether you're positive, but what variant you have?
So they have typing available, but that's not like at the point of care currently. I mean, we still have to send out to a reference lab to get a typing done.
So, I mean, I agree with you. We hear that this variant is worse than that variant, but none of our tests currently do we say to anybody, we just say you're positive. I don't have a clue what variant I had when I had it. You probably don't know what variant you had.
I'm guessing by what I'm hearing from others, just in, I guess, the strain and what the symptoms are, but I don't know.
Yeah.
You're right.
And so I hope that we could get to the point eventually, but I think regardless, this is the discussion we'll have, but I do think we probably need to put a renewed emphasis on vaccinations, because we still have a lot of people who have chosen not to get vaccinated, and from what I understand, those who have not been vaccinated and have gotten it, it's no fun. And as you said, you got vaccinated and it wasn't much fun with you either.
No.
So I think we do need to do that, but past that, our ability to recommend, insist, or whatever about wearing masks in a public building may be null and void, and that may be something that we need legal to
Yeah.
look at and kind of update us on where we may be with that deal.
So, and we've heard all the different questions that you're asking here, and let us go back now and put some more data together and come back to you on this, and then we'll schedule a major briefing on it.
All right.
Now I'll go to Monkey.
Yes, sir.
Monkeypox.
Yeah, so as if we didn't have enough problems, unfortunately, we got our first case of monkeypox late yesterday. Was kind of the update when we got it. So, along with everybody else, we're still kind of trying to find out all the details. The team's working on getting all the investigation done. But, the national and international situation is certainly progressing pretty fast. 866 cases in the U.S. and growing rapidly. Now the number should be 27 because we got our extra one in Texas here in Tarrant County. So what I've seen in other places, and I'm hoping it doesn't come true for us, but once it kind of starts, it goes fast. Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, a lot of these places, they had a few cases and then suddenly there was a lot more cases. So hopefully it doesn't go that way for us, but we're just kind of stay on top of it. Dallas has had their situation a couple times. There is vaccine available. So going back, back in the day we had smallpox that was eradicated and we still had smallpox vaccine. Because monkeypox is sort of a distant cousin of smallpox in that same family of viruses, that vaccine worked. But a lot of people were hesitant to take it. It does have that, cardiac side effects, just like we saw with the COVID vaccine, even though the numbers were, different. So people hesitated. So over time, there was a new vaccine developed which came to market in 2019. And that one works against smallpox and monkeypox. The manufacturer is Jynneos, so it's called the Jynneos vaccine. And
It's called what?
Say what now?
It's called what?
Jynneos. A lot of people call it just Genius, but it's Jynneos. I forget the full name. But so U.S. had a contract with the manufacturer. In the Strategic National Stockpile, they had 65,000 doses. They released about 56,000 to various cities and states. So Texas got about 3,000 doses. It's not a whole lot, but it's something to get started on. And there's some antivirals that work with treatment. Good news is recent outbreaks with monkeypox have been milder and milder. This one does seem to be on the milder side of things, but a lot more cases. Worldwide, 8,238 cases in 57 countries and growing really fast. So, we're just kind of waiting and seeing what happens. The team's ready. Whatever resources we're given in terms of vaccine, we'll utilize those. But here we are with another major outbreak on our hands, so we'll just kind of hope that this stays at bay and doesn't cause more issues.
Does monkeypox cause fatalities?
Typically, yes. So in the normal cycle of things, it can be up to 10 to 11% fatal. But like I said, last couple of decades of outbreaks have been as low as 1% or even lower. So far, I haven't seen a report of a death from the current outbreak out of these 8,000 cases. So it seems to be a much milder version of what we're seeing. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Vinny.
If we can go to the administrator section, before we begin any of our action items, I'm going to ask Ms. Sal to come up and let's talk a little bit about the small business program that we just rolled out yesterday at noon.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Megan.
So good news, the portal opened yesterday for the small business program, and for the most part, it went successfully. As of about 8:15 this morning, we had about 313 applications. About 231 of those are businesses with 10 or less employees, so we're hitting all of the different types. We did have some phone calls yesterday after the portal opened related to that unique entity ID number that you can obtain from sam.gov. There were some businesses who were applying for the number and then waiting to actually receive it, or were just having difficulty in general navigating the website and obtaining the number. So in order to allow those businesses a chance to obtain the grant funding, because the majority of them had successfully filled out the application and uploaded documentation, and we're again just waiting on this number, we are opening up the portal for people to be able to submit their application without that number, with the caveat that they must apply for and obtain that number prior to them receiving any kind of grant funding.
We cannot fund unless they have that number.
Yes, sir.
Are we going to require them to send us a copy of the application, or just simply say
So
it's there, you know, you don't get it until you have it?
there will be some process on the back end that IEM and the county will have to work through as far as
Okay.
making sure that we obtain that number from them prior to them receiving any kind of award. Were there any other issues or questions that were brought up at any of your locations?
I do have a thanks that I wanted to give.
Okay.
Is, I think it was my last court meeting where I wanted to make sure that the application could be paused or started and stopped. It didn't have to be done in one time, and I know that that is the case. So thank you all for making that work.
You're welcome.
I do have a suggestion, though, on this SAM number issue, is that we make sure in our communications that we're emphasizing sam.gov, because I had a constituent who had applied for the call for projects, and they needed the SAM number, and they just Googled SAM number, and they ended up having to pay someone, which they should not have. So,
No.
right. So I want to make sure that we're not putting our businesses who are already struggling in some position to think that they have to pay for something that's free. So just
Okay.
emphasizing that sam.gov.
And on the application itself, it does link them directly to the sam.gov
Okay, good.
website.
Okay,
So
great.
they only have to click on the link.
Okay.
So it should direct them there, and we haven't had any questions about people not being able to get to the website.
Okay.
They've successfully navigated to the website. It's just they're having trouble obtaining the actual number once they get to the website.
Once they get it. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I think just as a safety is, as we're building our FAQ for this, is just to say, should I have to pay for a SAM number? No, you should not have to pay for
Absolutely.
a SAM number. Okay. And the second thing is for our outreach efforts, and I know that there was a media toolkit and all of that, but what is our plan to share news of the program on streaming sites or radio, traditional radio, or TV news spots?
I do not know. I
Okay.
will get with Regina
Okay.
and get back with you on that. I do know that we're still sharing it out to, obviously, social media sites. I pushed out updates this morning to our ED partners and chambers about the sam.gov information. I've shared it with your precinct administrators
Yeah.
and staff. So we will make sure that we continue to work to get the word out
Okay.
as much as we can.
Okay, good.
Did we had talked early on about maybe having a couple of accounting type people to assist in filling out the applications, or to at least answer questions. Have we done that?
I don't believe so, not at this time.
Okay.
We have sent them to y'all's offices, obviously, for assistance in scanning and uploading their documentation if they need help. But again, I can get with our social media and Outlook and our
And we do use the Chambers of Commerce also as a vehicle to assist in filling out the application.
But I thought we had talked, not in the audit office, because they would be evaluating, or they might be, they'd ultimately end up having to go in and audit. But I thought we talked about in your office, maybe having two folks that would be eligible to respond to questions and stuff along those lines.
Okay, we'll have to go back.
And we do have the box set up. We are getting questions from people. We have not gotten any of those specific types of questions, but we do have our TCSB grant
Okay,
box set up for any questions that people may have as they're going through the application. They can also reach out to IEM because there's a contact us button on the application itself that directs them to their email, and I can tell you that IEM is responding as soon as they receive those emails to the
Okay.
applicant, and along with
Good.
our office.
Good.
So
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Megan.
So members of court, as we go into the administrator section, the first item is a general item, but we also are going to ask you to receive and file the COVID-19 recovery report for the week of reporting period of July 5th through the 10th. I will tell you that next week you'll see a difference on this report in that you're going to see an additional box because we will begin reporting on the small business program to the court at that time since it went live yesterday. So we're requesting that you receive and file.
Move to receive and file.
Second. We have a motion and a second to receive and file. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0 with one not present.
So members of the court, we can go to item number 2. This is an item that we have on the court agenda every week. It's a notification aspect. One as it relates to any changes in FRF funds budget, and the other is to receive and file of agenda items that require funding from FRF. As you can tell in the background, there's no action requested on either item A or item B, so we're asking that you simply receive and file this document.
Move to
So
receive and
moved.
file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Members of the court, on item number 3, we're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve the purchase and sale agreement, which is contingent upon the final approval of the Hospital District's Board of Managers between the Hospital District and Kroger, Texas, to purchase a tract of land for the JPS Health Network Medical Home Southwest.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Court, on item number 4, we're requesting that the court approve a service agreement between Tarrant County and Visit Fort Worth as relates to bringing the professional bull riders World Finals events to Tarrant County.
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Member courts, on items 5, 6, and 7, Ms. McMillan is here to address the court at this time.
Good morning, Judge Commissioners.
Good morning.
I have 3 requests for approvals of issuance of bonds by the Tarrant County Cultural Education Facilities Finance Corporation. And I did want to note that Randy Dean, the counsel for the Cultural Education Facilities Finance Corporation, is here, along with representatives from each of the borrowing agencies or entities. The first item I have is a request for approval of Series 2022 Hospital Revenue Bonds by the Tarrant County Cultural Education Facilities Finance Corporation for Christus Health in an amount not to exceed $550 million. These bonds will be utilized to refinance Harris County Health Facilities Development Corporation outstanding 2005 bonds and to finance the acquisition, construction, renovation of facilities owned by Christus Health in Dallas, Jefferson, Bexar, Nueces, Gregg, Smith, and Henderson counties. None of the facilities to be funded under this issuance are located in Tarrant County. The approval of these bonds is solely for tax-exempt IRS purposes, and the Tarrant County is not liable for repayment or of the principal or any interest associated with these bonds.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. So all of these are just refinancing. There's no new structures?
On this first one, on Christus, some of it is refunding previous bonds, and some of it will be used for acquisition and renovation for facilities that are already in existence.
Already, so everything is already there, and we're not, because again, I would not support doing anything without having a acknowledgement from the county or the city that this is within. but I'm assuming that since the facilities are already existing, that we're not doing anything.
And each of the counties which the facilities are located in are required to approve the issuance also, and all of these counties have provided that resolution of approval.
Okay. Any other discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
The next item is for the issuance of Series 2022 Hospital Revenue Refunding Bonds by the Tarrant County Cultural Education Facilities Finance Corporation for Baylor Scott and White Holding in an amount not to exceed $318,600,000. These bonds will be used to refund Tarrant County Cultural Education Facilities Finance Corporation Revenue Bonds Series 2015B, 2017A, 2017C, 2019C, and 2019, providing a cost savings and minimizing the cost of health facilities for Baylor Scott and White Holding. These past bonds financed different locations throughout the state, including improvements to facilities in Tarrant County, but it's simply refunding and refinancing existing bonds.
Move approval. Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And finally, we have approval of a resolution providing for the 2022 retirement facility revenue bonds for Wesley Court LLC, Meadow Lake LLC, and Craig Amarillo LLC in the amount not to exceed $180 million. These bonds will be issued to finance the acquisition, renovation, and construction of independent living, assisted living, and skilled nursing units in senior living communities in Abilene, Amarillo, and Tyler, Texas, all operated by LifeSpace Communities. Again, the counties in question have already provided approval of these bonds.
Move approval.
You figure it out. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Then finally, members of the court, if we could go to item number 8 under the administrator section, we're requesting that the Commissioners Court receive and file the single audit report for fiscal year ended September 30th, 2021.
Move for approval.
Second.
Oh, sorry, move to receive and file, rather.
So are these the two reports that somebody delivered to me yesterday?
Yes.
The only question that I have is on one of those reports on the checklist, it shows us as a low risk, and on the other one, it doesn't show us as a low risk. I don't know what it makes any difference, but I don't understand why we move from one to the other when it's the same accounting firm in that deal. And if that has any consequence whatsoever to anything in regards to this.
So, John, I can go ahead and we can contact Deloitte on this and see if they want to come forward and talk, or we'll tell them to come forward and talk about it. What we're doing now is not simply approving it, we're just simply receiving and following.
Okay. Any other discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That's a great question. I didn't see that.
Only a CPA would look at that kind of crap. Come on down, Tina.
Move to receive file personnel agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file personnel agenda. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Good
Morning,
morning.
Tina.
Back in the back, so it took me a minute. Welcome back, Commissioner Allen.
Thank
It's good to
you.
see you. Best wishes on your continued recovery.
Thank you.
We have several items for the court, as you can see. The next two items are approvals for out-of-class pay extensions. And just as a quick reminder, an out-of-class pay extension occurs when we have employees who assume higher level responsibilities. Typically, it's because the higher level position has been vacated through retirement, maybe family medical leave. And so just thought it might be helpful to remind you what that is. So, first class pay extension is a request from the Criminal District Attorney's Office. Ms. Wilson is requesting an extension that would be effective July 17th and then expire October 14th. We're estimating the cost of the extension to be approximately $838. That would be an impact to the general fund. However, the cost will be offset by salary savings.
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second, so wait a minute. I wonder, is the 828 the net? Because if we're looking at a 5% increase, that's not a whole lot for the period of time we're talking about.
No, it's not. So that tells me that the incumbent, and again, in this example, the individual who's not on site, who's off, is at a pay grade 71. So that tells me that this person is at a higher pay grade, higher pay grade and higher salary. And so even with the 5%, there's still some salary savings. But again, the cost is not even $1,000. So.
Okay. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So our next out-of-class pay extension comes from Commissioner Allen. If approved, this extension would begin on the 16th of July and end October 13th. We are estimating a cost to the Road and Bridge Fund of a little bit over $800, $807. And again, costs will be offset by salary savings.
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So our next three items are waivers of terminal benefits. And again, just as to revisit, in these cases, departments are asking the court's permission to fill positions as opposed to waiting for time to expire, and that time being any vacation that would be paid to the individual who's vacated their position. So the first request comes from the auditor's office. Ms. Tidwell, her grant manager, is retiring from county service at the end of July with 309 vacation hours. This position, as indicated in your court communique, oversees state and federal grants. So she sees this as a very critical position in her organization. She has selected a replacement and again is seeking the court's permission to move forward with filling that position effective 8/1, and that will require the court approving a waiver of 309 vacation hours at a net cost to the general fund of approximately $21,705 and some change that does include fringe benefits.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is this, do you know by chance whether or not this is somebody from within that's being promoted up to the new position?
Yes.
And so that's going to leave a vacancy someplace else? So is this?
And the individual, I believe I saw Kim Buchanan, she can correct me if I'm
She will,
incorrect.
because she's sitting back there.
Okay, so
Why
I
are you
believe
sitting
that,
back there instead? Is Renee there and I don't see her?
no, she's not, she's not.
You're in the wrong place.
So I believe the individual that's being promoted into this position is a project employee.
She's the one that's doing the FRF.
You got to come up here, Kim, maybe.
Come on, Kim.
And just for the court's information on the court communication, it does show that the salary savings for the remainder of 2022 as relates to this position and the filling of it at this time is going to be $5,259. So we'll have a savings just because of the pay issue.
Okay.
That's correct. She's in the FTE for FRF.
Come a little bit closer.
You got to pull it down and
All right.
speak into them. Yeah.
All right, she's in the FTE for the FRF grant manager position and will be moving and doing both roles.
Okay.
So we won't be filling the FRF grant
Okay.
manager.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So our next request, again, is a waiver. This is Constable Precinct 4, Constable Bedford, and I believe I saw him in the courtroom earlier. His senior deputy constable left county service at the end of June with 400 vacation hours. Each constable's offices only have one senior deputy constable, as a side note. In Constable Precinct 4, this individual assists with staff supervision and also acts as the field training officer for new deputies. Constable Bedford believes this is a critical position in his organization, and again is seeking the court's approval to waive 336 of the 400 vacation hours effective July 13th at a net cost to the general fund of approximately $13,229 and some change.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Again, you know, we're seeing more and more of the waiver of terminal benefits, and I just, you know, the grants person, okay, the next one we're gonna be talking about is a chief of staff position. And I can understand, but I think we've got to really look at, if there are instances, can we hold off and say that? Because, I mean, we're basically double filling those positions for the tune of about 10 weeks on most of these folks when we do this.
Yeah.
And
and as we discussed, Judge Whitley, yesterday, I'm anticipating that we're going to have just as many requests coming to the court, probably through the end of this calendar year. I will say, though, that many departments do hold off and allow the time to expire. And so I don't want to think that this is representative of every department, because it's not. Many departments will just hold off and either have staff, fill in if they have staff. It's just difficult for smaller departments because there are no additional resources. So it's really tough for the smaller departments to wait. So.
any other discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So the last waiver, and I know I'm popular again this week, just like last week, comes from the tax office. Ms. Burgess's chief of staff. You all know Tom Spencer retired from county service at the end of June. He had 400 vacation hours. Ms. Burgess has selected his replacement and is requesting a waiver of 312 vacation hours effective July 18th with a net cost, estimated net cost to the general fund of approximately $27,000. That does include fringe benefits.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. So let's look at the standpoint of, we've got somebody, this would apply for probably the other ones too. We promote from within, so that person moves up, they've got 400 hours. So when it comes to filling their position, are you gonna be coming and saying, okay, now I need a waiver for this person who I moved up, because, does it ever end?
Well, it can end. So in the example that you gave, the person now who's moved to the new position and has vacated a position, when the department makes a decision to fill the vacant position, then it just depends upon who they're bringing in, if it's an external applicant, if it's an internal applicant, and how much, and I think and Ange, correct me, so we're only coming to the court to ask about these terminal benefits when individuals leave county service, right? Because then that's, as you explained it, that's when we would have the potential for a double fill. So as long as we have internal shifting happening, someone's not actually leaving county service, they're not being paid, right, for their vacation benefits. If we have people simply moving around, up and around, because sometimes people will take lateral moves as well, simply because they want a different experience. And so we're not paying those individuals in those instances because they're not leaving county service, if we're talking about people who are moving within the county, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So item 7, we're asking the court to approve an extension for project employment in the district clerk's office. And Mr. Wilder is present. If the court has, or was, I guess he still is, if the court has questions for him. This is a long-standing project temp who has been working on the document scanning project. There is no impact to the general fund. These are grant dollars. And Commissioner Brooks, these are the requests that we know get your attention. And I did want to report that the budget director and I spoke yesterday, and she and Mr. Wilder have been in talks. They have heard, we have all heard your concerns. And so I believe Helen has been working on moving these project positions to full-time positions. And remember, the difference between the project and full-time is the retirement piece, okay? And so she's working actively on that, I believe, and Helen will correct me if I misstate this. I believe we'll be ready to post one of those full-time positions next posting cycle. She's shaking her head yes. And so what that means is that if this individual, this long-term temp, if, I believe it's a she, if she wishes to compete, because she'll have to compete, just like we all do for civil service positions, then certainly she can compete and be considered, and then, of course, hired by the district clerk's office, if that's his.
And so that next cycle will be Monday morning.
Yes, sir.
And again, so I don't guess I had realized that another difference between an FTE and a project is they have to go through the civil service application process, all that screening, and then be interviewed and hired by the department or elected official.
That's the requirement for any civil service position. And remember, project employees, they actually are in the temporary category. So temporary positions, there is no requirement for posting. However, many departments ask us to post simply because they want us to go through that competitive process for them, right? They want to see the very best applicants and then make a decision, so.
I'm glad to see that we're making some progress in this area, and I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So we're gonna, for right now, just hop past item 8. We'll come back to it. Item 9, we're asking the court to approve the filing of Internal Revenue Service Form 720 with payment for the Patient Center Outcomes Research Institute fee applicable to plan year 2021 self-insured employee health plan benefits. That's a mouthful. And so this is a fee that's imposed by the Affordable Care Act. As legislation stands currently, this is a mandated fee through 2029. And the Institute's mission, it's called PCORI. So if you hear that term, that's the institute that's being referred to. So the Institute's mission is to advance the quality and relevant evidence-based medicine. I probably didn't say that right. So this is a research center that works with insurers, patients, doctors to try to find the best and most effective ways to deliver medical care. So that's what this center does. Again, we're required under the Affordable Care Act to pay this fee. The fee is based upon our average covered lives in 2021 at a cost of $2.79 per covered life. And so that calculation means that we will pay $22,250.25 for 2021.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
A question on the covered lives, so that would be our employees plus their dependents?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's all I have, thank you.
No further discussion. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So Ms. Ramnaran is going to address item 8, and as she comes, I just wanted the court to know that our wellness coordinator, Henry Tolstad, has been working with Vinnie's staff, and Public Health will have their on-site clinic, on-site, here in the administration building on July 26th, so that will be our next court meeting. Vinnie will have staff that will be set up in room 403, one floor down. They will be giving vaccines, the first and second doses, boosters. No registration is required. Obviously, it's no cost to employees. We would encourage employees to bring your county badges with you. And if I didn't tell you the time, it's from 9 to 12:30 on July 26th. So mark your calendars.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ange.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ange.
Hi, Ange.
Hi. So we are here to get your approval for a change to the external lateral transfer officer policy for the sheriff's office. You may recall last year we added this policy to provide for higher starting salaries for deputy sheriffs in the patrol position, or patrol division, excuse me. So what it allows them to do is get credit for years of experience, similar to the discussion with Paul this morning, for their similar employment in other similar entities. What we're asking you to do this afternoon, is extend that to detention officers. So if you look at the proposed policy, which was an attachment to the court communication, essentially the new portions are the second bullet point, the bullet point, sub-bullet point, so to speak, below that, and then the addition of the detention officer information in the salary section. So in short, detention officers, they have to be licensed as correction officers or jailers by TCOL. They have to be employed as a corrections officer or a supervisor at the time of hire. They have to have a minimum of 2 years of experience working as a corrections officer, a licensed correction officer, which is important, in a county facility. The rationale behind that being county facilities are the ones who need licensed jailers. The state jails, et cetera, do not need licensed jailers. And so what we're looking for—
That makes a lot of sense.
Sure. What we're looking for are people with applicable experience and that license. And they must have no major sustained or pending misconduct allegations within the previous 24 months. If they're not employed, there is a provision for them as well. They must have served within a corrections officer position within the last 2 years, have a minimum of 5 total years of experience as a licensed officer, again, in a county facility. And they must still be licensed in good standing. The salary works fairly similarly to what we have for patrol, just for a different scale. So the 2 years minimum would be a 52C, which is 2 steps above their current hire-in rate. 3 years would be a 52D, so on and so forth, until 6 years max, which would be a 52G. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is this designed to make it easier for us to fill some of our vacant positions?
Absolutely. We're hoping it attracts licensed, experienced corrections officers who then wouldn't have to start over at 52A. They could start more commensurate with their current salaries.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. The only thing I'd like to say is I'd like for you to look at other positions within the county and see if we need to address similar policies with regards, whether it be craft, whether it be some other areas. I know we have a tendency not to give, experience situations in there, but
Will do.
let's look at that.
I do have one question, and so there was a point in there that talked about the adjustment for the review date. Will you just refresh my memory on that?
Yes, so review dates are set upon hire, and then after step increases in the law enforcement area, or promotions, some demotions, it just depends. So we would consider this similar to a step increase. What happens is they come in at 52A or 53D if you're patrol. They go through their probation, not their probation, their training period, which is a minimum of 8 weeks. And after that, they get the increase to the step that is outlined, whether that's C, D, E, F, or G.
And so then at that point, that's when the review date is established?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's when they get the bump to the higher level.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you.
I think that means unanimous.
He did.
Okay, who's coming at me next? It must be Melissa's turn.
Good
You brought in the whole crew today.
Sorry?
I said I saw the whole crew come in today.
Yeah, we're back up. We have 5 items for your consideration this afternoon. The first item is bid number 2022-140. This is an award recommendation for our annual contract for heavy-duty equipment and truck parts and supplies, awarding to the various primary and secondary vendors listed per unit price and discount from list price.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson? Did I get a thumbs up back there?
You got a thumbs up.
You're muted for some reason. The vote is 4-0-1.
The second item is also an award recommendation regarding bid number 2022-149. This is our semi-annual contract for copy paper, envelopes, and other related products, awarding to the various vendors, the various primary, secondary, and alternate vendors per unit price.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson? Motion passes 4-0-1.
The third.
Yes, sir.
I don't think it's proper to characterize her absence as an extension. She's just absent. 4-0, not 4-0-1.
Is that probably okay? That'd be fine.
The third item is also an award recommendation regarding bid number 2022-160. This is our annual contract for floor mat and shop tile services, awarding to the primary and secondary vendor per unit price.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson? 4-0.
The fourth item is regarding bid number 2022-087. We're requesting rejection of all bids for the Golden Height Road storm drain improvements for transportation services. The project was over budget.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson? Motion passes 4-0.
And the last item is regarding bid number 2022-133. This is for the criminal district court renovations, general contractor work for facilities management construction services. We're requesting rejection of all bids and rebid with revised specifications. We only received one bid, and that bidder did not sign the addendum, and there was a lot of additional work in that addendum.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Transportation Services. Randy, come on down.
Good afternoon, Judge, Commissioners.
Hi, Randy.
We are requesting the court's approval of, these two items are actually related to the 2021 Transportation Bond Program. The first item is we're requesting the court's approval of a professional services agreement with Freeze and Nichols related to the administrative support for the bond program.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson? Motion passes unanimously.
And for our second item, we're requesting the court's approval of the professional services agreement with DEC North Texas LLC related to the countywide initiatives and partnerships category of the 2021 Transportation Bond Program.
Move for approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson, you have an interlocal agreement?
Commissioner Johnson has an interlocal agreement with the Hazel Independent School District. Has it been approved by the district attorney's office?
It has, Commissioner.
I move approval on his behalf.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson? Motion passes unanimously. Are there any appointments today? There being none, then we will move on to the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson? Motion passes unanimously. We have already discussed our briefing items. So with that, I will recess our open meeting to proceed to close to discuss items exempt under section 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code. That means they ain't back there. I saw the blink. Took Regina a while to get back there, didn't it, Regina? She's not going to blink at me again. And all I got to do is get 2 more in here and we'll be ready to go.
I heard your clarion call. Regina and I were talking COVID.
Did she have to run back there? So you were still talking with her when you came in? Well, then there's somebody else back there.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That was Carl back there.
Well, no, somebody blinked. Okay, Roy or Gary, come on. Having returned from our closed session, there being no business to conduct at this time, we stand adjourned.